The blizzard had stripped away everything except her will to breathe, and even that was fading fast when Isaac Rawlins found her curled beneath the skeletal branches of a frozen cottonwood tree. Her lips blue as a summer sky, and her fingers twisted into claws against her chest. He had been tracking a missing mare through the storm when his horse suddenly stopped, refusing to go forward despite his urging, and that stubborn resistance had saved a life that January morning in 1878, outside Deer Lodge, Montana. Isaac swung down from his gelding and approached the huddled form, his heart hammering against his ribs when he realized it was a woman, half buried in snow that had drifted around her like a white shroud. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, lifting her into his arms with a gentleness that contradicted his rough appearance. She weighed almost nothing, her body so cold he could feel the chill through his shirt, and when her eyelids fluttered open for just a moment, he saw terror in those hazel depths before they closed again. The ride back to his ranch house took 40 minutes that felt like hours, the wind howling around them while Isaac held her against his chest and urged his horse forward through snow that reached past the animal's knees. He kicked open the door of his modest cabin and carried her straight to the hearth, laying her down on the braided rug before the fireplace where embers still glowed from that morning's fire. He built up the flames quickly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he added kindling and logs until heat began to radiate through the small room. She was shivering now, which he knew was better than the deathly stillness from before, and he worked to remove her soaked clothing with as much respect as he could manage, averting his eyes while he replaced her frozen garments with his own long underwear and 2 thick wool blankets. Her feet were the worst, pale and waxy, and he rubbed them carefully between his calloused palms, trying to restore circulation without causing more damage. When her eyes opened again, she screamed and tried to pull away from him, her body thrashing weakly against the blankets. Isaac held up both hands and moved back, giving her space while keeping his voice low and steady. "Easy now. You are safe here. I found you in the snow, brought you to my place to warm up. Nobody is going to hurt you." She stared at him with wild eyes, her breathing rapid and shallow, and he could see every rib through the thin fabric of the undershirt. Her dark blonde hair hung in tangled ropes around her face, and bruises marked her arms in the distinct shape of fingers. Someone had hurt this woman, hurt her badly, and then left her to die in the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 5 years. "What is your name?" Isaac asked, still keeping his distance. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at first, just a hoarse rasp that made him wince. He moved slowly to the water bucket near the door, ladled some into a tin cup, and brought it back to her. She watched him approach like a cornered animal, but when he held out the cup, her thirst won over her fear. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and he refilled it 3 more times before she finally seemed satisfied. "Nora," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. "Nora Morrison. Isaac Rawlins. This is my ranch about 5 miles west of Deer Lodge. Do you remember how you got out there in the storm?" Her face crumpled and she turned away from him, her shoulders shaking. Isaac let her cry, busying himself with heating up leftover stew from the previous night's supper. When he brought her a bowl with a spoon, she took it with trembling hands but barely managed 3 bites before exhaustion claimed her, and she slumped against the pillows he had propped behind her back. He caught the bowl before it could spill and set it aside, then adjusted the blankets around her thin frame. She was already asleep, her breathing deep and even, and Isaac settled into his chair by the fire to watch over her through the rest of the storm. The blizzard raged for 2 more days, keeping them trapped inside the cabin while snow piled up against the walls and wind rattled the shutters. Nora slept for most of that first day, waking only to drink water and eat a few spoonfuls of whatever Isaac prepared. He kept the fire burning constantly, boiled snow for drinking water, and tried to give her privacy while staying close enough to help if she needed him. On the second day, she was strong enough to sit up on her own, and Isaac noticed she was watching him with less fear and more curiosity. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that needed cutting and a beard he kept trimmed short. His eyes were a clear gray that people said could look right through a person, but Nora seemed to find something trustworthy in them because she began to talk. "My husband brought me out here from Pennsylvania 6 months ago," she said quietly while Isaac carved slices from a dried ham. "James Morrison. He had plans to start a mining operation in the mountains, said we would be rich within a year." Isaac kept working, not pushing her, and after a moment she continued. "He was not the man I thought I married. Back east, he was charming and attentive, always bringing me flowers and speaking of our future together. But once we left civilization behind, once there was nobody around to see, he changed." Her hands twisted in the blanket, knuckles white. "He started drinking more, getting angry over nothing. The mine was not producing like he expected, and he blamed me somehow, said I had brought him bad luck. When I tried to leave, tried to find work in town to earn passage back home, he found me and dragged me back to our claim. Said I was his property and he would kill me before he let me embarrass him by running off." Isaac set down his knife, his jaw tight. He had known men like that, men who thought marriage gave them ownership over another human being, and he had never understood that kind of cruelty. 3 days ago, he came back to our cabin drunk and meaner than usual. We fought, and I told him I was leaving whether he liked it or not, that I would rather freeze to death than spend another day as his wife. He said that could be arranged. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He took me out into the storm, walked me miles from anywhere, and left me there. Told me the cold would do what he did not have the courage to do himself. "Where is your claim?" Isaac asked, his voice hard. "North of here, up in the hills near Silver Creek. But you cannot go after him. He is dangerous, Isaac. He has killed men before, I am sure of it. I have seen him practice his draw, and he is fast." "I am not planning to go after him," Isaac said, though his fists were clenched at his sides. "But if he comes looking for you, he will find me first." Nora looked at him with something like hope flickering in her expression, and Isaac felt his heart twist in his chest. He barely knew this woman, had found her only 2 days ago, but already he felt a fierce protectiveness toward her that he could not quite explain. The storm finally broke on the third day, leaving the world outside transformed into a landscape of white hills and glittering ice. Isaac spent the morning digging out the barn and checking on his horses, and the small herd of cattle he kept in the sheltered valley behind his house. Everything had survived, though his animals were hungry and restless from being confined so long. When he returned to the cabin, he found Nora standing by the window, wrapped in blankets and staring out at the snow. She turned when he entered, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "I should have died out there," she said. "Part of me wishes I had. At least then this would all be over." Isaac crossed the room in 3 strides and took her gently by the shoulders, waiting until she met his eyes. "Do not say that. Do not ever say that. You survived because you are stronger than that bastard gave you credit for, and you are going to keep surviving. I will help you however I can, but you have to want to live, Nora. You have to fight." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to give her strength because she nodded slowly. "I am tired of being afraid," she whispered. "I am tired of feeling broken." "Then we will put you back together," Isaac said firmly. "It will take time, but I promise you, you do not have to face this alone." Over the following weeks, Nora slowly began to heal. Isaac gave her his bed and slept on the floor by the fire, refusing her protests that she was taking his space. He cooked simple meals and made sure she ate, even when she said she was not hungry, and he talked to her about the ranch, about his horses, about anything that might distract her from her dark thoughts. She was grateful but also wary, clearly expecting him to demand something in return for his kindness. Isaac saw the way she tensed whenever he came too close, saw how she positioned herself near exits and kept track of where he was at all times. It broke his heart that she had been taught to expect violence from men, and he made sure to move slowly around her, to announce his presence before entering a room, to respect every boundary she set. As February arrived and the worst of winter began to ease, Nora started helping around the cabin. She could not do much at first, her strength still depleted, but she insisted on washing dishes and mending his clothes and helping with simple cooking tasks. Isaac protested that she should rest, but she told him she needed to feel useful, needed to do something besides think about everything that had happened. They fell into an easy routine, and Isaac found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire when they would talk about their lives before Montana. Nora had grown up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a seamstress and a factory worker who had died when she was 16. She had worked as a teacher before meeting James Morrison, had loved her students and dreamed of one day opening her own school. Isaac shared his own story, how he had come west after the war, looking for a fresh start away from the devastation he had witnessed. He had worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy this land, and he had built everything here with his own hands. He raised horses mostly, selling them to the army and to ranchers who needed good working animals, and he ran a small herd of cattle that provided enough income to keep him comfortable. "This place is beautiful," Nora said one evening while they sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You have built something real here, something that matters." "It is peaceful," Isaac agreed. "Sometimes lonely, but peaceful." She looked at him over the rim of her cup, and he saw curiosity in her eyes. "Have you never wanted to marry? Have a family?" Isaac was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I was engaged once before the war, sweet girl named Catherine who promised to wait for me. But when I came back, I was different. I had seen things, done things that changed me, and she could not understand that. She married a banker instead, someone who could give her the safe, predictable life she wanted." "I am sorry," Nora said softly. "It was a long time ago. I made my peace with it. Figured maybe I was meant to be alone, that some men are just built for solitude." "I do not think that is true," Nora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think you have one of the kindest hearts I have ever known, Isaac Rawlins. Any woman would be lucky to have you." Their eyes met and held, and Isaac felt something shift between them, some subtle change in the air that made his pulse quicken. He cleared his throat and stood, making an excuse about checking the horses before bed, and missed the way Nora watched him go with something like longing in her expression. March brought warmer weather and the first signs of spring, and with it came visitors. Isaac was working in the barn when he heard horses approaching, and he stepped outside to see 3 men riding up the trail toward his cabin. He recognized the sheriff of Deer Lodge, Tom Bennett, along with 2 deputies. Isaac walked out to meet them, wiping his hands on his work pants and trying to keep his expression neutral even as his gut told him this visit had something to do with Nora. "Morning, Isaac," Sheriff Bennett said, tipping his hat. "Got a few questions for you if you have a minute." "Sure thing." "What is this about?" "Looking for a woman who went missing during that big storm back in January. Nora Morrison, wife of James Morrison, who has a mining claim up near Silver Creek." Morrison reported her missing about 2 weeks ago, said she wandered off during the blizzard, and he has been searching for her ever since. Isaac kept his face carefully blank even as rage burned in his chest. The bastard had left her to die, and then reported her missing to cover his tracks. "What makes you think I know anything about it?" Morrison said his wife might have tried to come this direction, said she had talked about heading to Deer Lodge. "Your place is along the way. Figured maybe you saw something or found something." Isaac considered his options. He could lie, could say he had not seen anyone, but that would only buy temporary safety. Morrison would keep looking and eventually the truth would come out. Better to control the story now. "I found her," he said bluntly. "During the storm about 5 miles from here. She was nearly frozen to death, so I brought her back here to recover." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "She is here now, she is. And before you go talking to her, you should know that Morrison did not just let her wander off. He took her out into that blizzard and left her to die." "That is a serious accusation, Isaac." "It is the truth. Ask her yourself. She has bruises all over her body from where he grabbed her, and she will tell you exactly what he did." Sheriff Bennett exchanged glances with his deputies, then nodded slowly. "All right. I would like to speak with Mrs. Morrison, if that is acceptable." Isaac led them to the cabin, knocking on the door before entering. Nora was inside, kneading dough for bread, and she looked up with a smile that froze when she saw the men behind Isaac. All the color drained from her face, and she took an instinctive step backward. "It is all right," Isaac said quickly, moving to stand between her and the others. "This is Sheriff Bennett from Deer Lodge. Your husband reported you missing and they are investigating." "He said I wandered off," Nora said, her voice shaking. "He told them I wandered off, did he not?" "That is what he said," the sheriff confirmed. "But Isaac here tells a different story. I would like to hear your version, madam, if you are willing to share it." Nora looked at Isaac, and he gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice growing stronger as she told the whole story. She described the abuse, the threats, the way James had dragged her into the storm and abandoned her. The deputies took notes, and Sheriff Bennett's expression grew darker with every word. "Why did you not come forward sooner?" Bennett asked when she finished. "Because I was afraid," Nora said simply. "I am still afraid. My husband is a violent man, Sheriff. If you confront him about this, he will come looking for me and he will kill me if he gets the chance." "We will protect you, madam. I promise you that." "With respect, Sheriff, you cannot be here all the time. Isaac has kept me safe these past 2 months, and I trust him to continue doing so." Bennett looked between them, clearly picking up on the unspoken connection, and finally nodded. "All right. I will go speak with Morrison, get his side of the story. In the meantime, you stay here with Isaac where you are safe. I will post a deputy in town in case Morrison comes looking for you there, and I will make sure he knows there will be consequences if he tries anything." After the lawman left, Nora sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "He knows I am alive now," she whispered. "He will come for me, Isaac. I know he will." "Then I will be ready for him," Isaac said, checking the rifle that hung over the door. "He will not touch you again, Nora, I swear it." That night, Isaac moved his bedroll to the space directly in front of the door, positioning himself as the first line of defense if anyone tried to enter. Nora protested that he would be uncomfortable, but he refused to budge, and eventually, she gave up arguing and retreated to the bedroom. 3 days later, James Morrison came. Isaac was chopping wood behind the cabin when he heard the sound of a horse approaching at speed. He grabbed his axe and moved around to the front just as a man dismounted in the yard, his face twisted with fury. Morrison was shorter than Isaac, wiry and quick-looking, with mean eyes and a gun belt strapped around his waist. "Where is she?" Morrison demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Where is my wife? If you mean Nora, she is here, but she is not going anywhere with you. The hell she is not. She belongs to me, bought and paid for. She is not property and you have no claim on her anymore, not after what you did. Morrison's hand dropped to his gun and Isaac tightened his grip on the axe handle. That is my wife and I am taking her home. You can hand her over peaceful, or I can go through you. Either way is fine by me. The cabin door opened and Nora stepped out, and Isaac wanted to shout at her to get back inside where it was safe. But she walked past him, her spine straight and her head high, and faced her husband without flinching. I am not your wife anymore, James. I will not go back to you no matter what you say or do. You think you have a choice, Morrison snarled. You think this cowboy is going to protect you. I will kill him and drag you back to the claim, and there is not a damn thing you can do about it. Touch her and you will hang, Isaac said, his voice cold. Sheriff knows the whole story now. You abandoned your wife in a blizzard, left her to die. That is attempted murder in any court. Your word against mine. And out here, a man's wife is his business. Not anymore, Sheriff Bennett's voice rang out across the yard, and Isaac looked over to see the lawman riding up with both deputies flanking him. James Morrison, you are under arrest for attempted murder and assault. Morrison spun around, his face going red with rage. This is bullshit. She is my wife. She is a human being and you tried to kill her. Now you can come peacefully or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. For a moment, Isaac thought Morrison was going to draw his gun, thought this was going to end in violence. But then the deputies both pulled their rifles, and Morrison seemed to realize he was outmatched. He raised his hands slowly, hatred burning in his eyes as he stared at Nora. This is not over, he hissed. You hear me? This is not over. Yes, it is, Nora said firmly. It is over, James. You have no power over me anymore. The deputies took Morrison into custody, binding his wrists and leading him to one of their horses. Sheriff Bennett lingered for a moment, tipping his hat to Nora. You did the right thing, madam, standing up to him like that. Takes courage. We will hold him in Deer Lodge until the circuit judge comes through, probably be about 6 weeks. Expect you will need to testify at his trial. I will be there, Nora said, after they left. Isaac turned to find Nora shaking like a leaf, all her bravado gone. He put his arms around her without thinking, and she collapsed against his chest, great heaving sobs racking her thin frame. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft reassurances that everything was going to be all right now. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes red and swollen. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For saving my life, for protecting me, for believing me. I do not know how I can ever repay you. You do not owe me anything, Nora. I did what any decent person would do. No, she said, shaking her head. Most men would have turned me away, or worse, turned me over to James. You risked everything to keep me safe, and I will never forget that. They stood there in the yard, wrapped in each other's arms, and Isaac realized with startling clarity that he was falling in love with this brave, broken woman who had stumbled into his life during a blizzard. The realization should have frightened him, but instead it felt right, like something that had been waiting to happen all along. The weeks leading up to the trial passed quietly, with spring arriving in full force across the Montana landscape. Isaac taught Nora to ride one of his gentler mares, and they spent long afternoons exploring the ranch together, checking on cattle and mending fences. She was gaining weight finally, her face filling out and color returning to her cheeks, and she smiled more often now, real smiles that reached her eyes. They worked side by side during the days, and in the evenings they sat by the fire and talked about everything and nothing. Isaac found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, stories from his childhood and his time in the war, fears and dreams he had kept buried for years. Nora listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and shared her own hopes for the future. "I want to teach again," she told him one night. "I know Deer Lodge has a school, but they need another teacher. The current schoolmaster told me so when I inquired in town last week. I could start in the fall, once everything with James is settled." "That is a fine plan," Isaac said, trying to ignore the pang in his chest at the thought of her leaving the ranch. "You would make an excellent teacher." "I would still need somewhere to live," Nora continued, not quite meeting his eyes. "The boarding house in town is expensive, and I do not have much money saved." "You can stay here as long as you need," Isaac said immediately. "There is no rush for you to leave." "Isaac." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I cannot stay here forever without people talking. It is not proper for an unmarried woman to be living alone with a bachelor, even if we are not doing anything wrong. It could damage both our reputations." He knew she was right, but the thought of losing her, of waking up to an empty house again, was almost unbearable. "What if we made it proper?" The words were out before he could stop them, and Nora's eyes went wide. "What are you saying?" Isaac took a deep breath, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I am saying that these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I am saying that I care about you, Nora, more than I have ever cared about anyone. I am saying that if you wanted to stay, not as a guest but as my wife, I would be the luckiest man in Montana." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a terrible moment, Isaac thought he had made a huge mistake, had pushed too hard too fast. But then she was moving toward him, taking his rough hands in her smaller ones. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling in love with you the first time I woke up and saw you sitting by the fire, watching over me like some kind of guardian angel. But Isaac, I am still married to James, at least legally. I cannot marry you until that is resolved." "Then we will wait," Isaac said, pulling her close. "We will wait as long as we need to. But when this is over, when you are free of him for good, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will have me." "Yes," Nora breathed against his chest. "Yes, Isaac, I will have you." He tilted her chin up and kissed her softly. A gentle press of lips that held all the promise of their future together. Nora melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, and Isaac felt something settle deep in his soul. Some part of himself he had not even known was missing, clicking perfectly into place. The trial took place in late April in the courthouse at Deer Lodge, a simple wooden building that served as the center of justice for the territory. Isaac accompanied Nora, standing beside her while she gave her testimony, his hand on her shoulder offering silent support. She spoke clearly and calmly, detailing the abuse and the attempted murder, and Isaac saw several members of the jury wince at her words. James Morrison's lawyer tried to paint Nora as an unfaithful wife who had run away to be with Isaac, suggested that she had fabricated the entire story to justify her abandonment of her marriage. But Nora held firm, and when Isaac took the stand to describe finding her half frozen in the snow, his testimony corroborated every detail of her story. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on both counts of assault and attempted murder. The judge sentenced Morrison to 15 years hard labor at the territorial prison in Deer Lodge, and as an afterthought, granted Nora a divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment. Isaac watched Morrison being led away in chains, saw the man's face twisted with impotent rage, and felt nothing but relief that this chapter was finally closed. Nora stood beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his, and when the courtroom cleared, she turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "It is really over," she said wonderingly. "I am finally free." "You are free," Isaac agreed, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "And now we can start planning our future." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Deer Lodge, with Sheriff Bennett and his wife serving as witnesses. Nora wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue fabric Isaac had bought in town, and she carried wildflowers that grew in the meadows around the ranch. Isaac wore his best suit, the one he saved for funerals and special occasions, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed his bride with all the love and devotion he felt in his heart. The wedding night was gentle and tender, Isaac taking his time to show Nora that intimacy could be something beautiful instead of something to fear. She wept afterward, but they were tears of joy and relief, and Isaac held her close and promised that he would spend every day of the rest of his life making her happy. They settled into married life easily, their routines already established from the months of living together. Nora took over the household duties completely, freeing Isaac to focus on the ranch, but she also helped with outside work when he needed an extra pair of hands. She learned to doctor sick cattle, to gentle young horses, to read weather signs and anticipate storms. In the fall, Nora began teaching at the school in Deer Lodge 3 days a week, riding into town on Monday mornings and returning Wednesday evenings. Isaac worried every time she left, but she always came back with stories about her students and a smile on her face, and he could see how much the work fulfilled her. Winter arrived again, but this time, Isaac did not dread the isolation and cold. He had Nora to warm his bed and his heart, and they spent snowy evenings reading together or playing cards or simply talking by the fire. Sometimes he would play his old guitar while she sang, her voice clear and sweet, and Isaac thought those might be his favorite moments when the world outside disappeared, and it was just the two of them wrapped in their own small universe. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The mares foaled, producing 5 healthy colts that would bring good money when they were old enough to sell. The cattle calved without trouble, adding to the herd, and Nora discovered she was pregnant, her face glowing with happiness when she told Isaac the news one morning over breakfast. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know we have not talked much about children." Isaac stood and pulled her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously wet. "I am beyond happy. You have given me everything I never dared to dream of, Nora. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with hope in my heart. I love you more than words can say." "I love you too," she whispered. "So very much." Their son was born in November during a cold snap that frosted the windows and turned the world white. Nora labored through the night with the help of the midwife from town, and Isaac paced the main room, wearing a path in the floorboards until the sun rose, and he finally heard the thin wail of a newborn. The midwife called him in, and he found Nora propped against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet your son," she said, her voice hoarse but filled with wonder. Isaac approached reverently, hardly daring to breathe as he looked down at the small red face and shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air, and Isaac felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "He is perfect," Isaac managed to say around the lump in his throat. "You are perfect, both of you." "What should we name him?" Nora asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on anything final. Now, looking at his son's face, Isaac thought of new beginnings and second chances, of hope rising from despair. "How about Daniel?" he suggested. It means God is my judge. Seems fitting after everything we have been through. Daniel Rawlins, Nora said, testing out the name. I like it. It is strong. Daniel proved to be a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly and filled the cabin with noise and joy. Isaac had never imagined he would be good with children, but he took to fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. He walked the floor with Daniel during fussy nights, changed diapers without complaint, and talked to his son in a gentle voice that never failed to make Nora smile. Nora returned to teaching when Daniel was 6 months old, bringing the baby with her to school where he charmed her students and slept in a cradle she kept beside her desk. Isaac missed them during those few days each week, but he also valued the time alone to handle ranch work, and the reunions when they returned home were always sweet. The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life, marked by seasons and harvests rather than calendars. Daniel learned to walk and talk, becoming a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere and peppered him with endless questions. Isaac taught him to ride before he was 4, settling him on a gentle old mare and walking beside him until the boy found his balance. When Daniel was 5, Nora gave birth to twin girls, identical except for a small birthmark on the younger one's left shoulder. They named them Sarah and Emma, and Isaac joked that he was now hopelessly outnumbered by females in his own house. Nora laughed and told him he loved it, and she was right. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management, growing from a modest operation into one of the most successful in the region. He hired on a few ranch hands to help with the work, men who lived in the bunkhouse he built near the barn and who respected both Isaac and Nora. The horse breeding program became particularly profitable, with buyers coming from as far as Wyoming and Dakota Territory to purchase Rawlins horses. Deer Lodge grew too, transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town with paved streets and gas lamps and a new brick courthouse. The railroad came through in 1883, connecting them to the wider world and making it easier to ship cattle and goods to market. Progress was happening all around them, but Isaac and Nora held fast to the values that had brought them together, the simple pleasures of hard work and family and home. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Isaac and Nora sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching their children play in the yard. Daniel was 12 now, tall and strong for his age, helping his little sisters build a fort from fallen branches. The twins were 7, chattering constantly and getting into everything with the fearless energy of children who had never known anything but love and security. "Can you believe it has been 7 years since we married?" Nora asked, her hand finding Isaac's. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "I know what you mean," Isaac said, squeezing her fingers. "I think about that day I found you in the snow, and it seems impossible that it was really that long ago. But then I look at our life now, our children, this place we have built, and I am grateful for every single day that has passed. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found me, if your horse had not stopped that morning?" "I try not to think about it," Isaac admitted. "But yes, sometimes I wonder. And then I thank God that I was in the right place at the right time, that I was given the chance to know you and love you." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence while the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice soft. "You saved my life that day, Isaac, but you did more than that. You saved my soul. When you found me, I was broken in ways that had nothing to do with the cold. I had lost faith in humanity, in love, in the possibility of happiness. I thought I was damaged beyond repair." "You were never broken," Isaac said firmly. Hurt, yes, scared, absolutely, but your spirit was intact, Nora. Your strength, your courage, your kindness. Those things were always there. I just helped you remember them. You did more than help me remember, she said, lifting her head to look at him. You showed me what real love looks like. Patient and kind and selfless. You never demanded anything from me, never made me feel like I owed you for saving me. You just gave, freely and completely, until I had healed enough to give back. Isaac touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Loving you has never felt like giving anything up, Nora. It has only ever felt like gaining everything I never knew I needed. She kissed him then, slow and sweet, and Isaac felt the same flutter in his chest that he had felt on their wedding night, that he felt every time she looked at him with love shining in her eyes. After 7 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless shared experiences, he was still completely, helplessly in love with his wife. Daniel called out that they had finished their fort and wanted their parents to come see. So Isaac and Nora walked hand in hand across the yard to admire the construction. It was lopsided and would probably collapse in the first strong wind, but their son was so proud that Isaac praised it lavishly, and Nora declared it the finest fort in all of Montana. The twins demanded a story before bed, so they all gathered in the main room while Nora read from a book of fairy tales. Isaac sat with Sarah on one knee and Emma on the other. Daniel sprawled on the rug at his feet, and he thought about how different his life might have been if he had taken a different path that January morning, if he had turned left instead of right, if his horse had not stopped. But he had not taken a different path. He had found Nora, had brought her home, had fallen in love with her steady and sure. They had built this life together from nothing, from the ashes of her old life and the loneliness of his, and it was more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. After the children were asleep, Isaac and Nora retired to their own bedroom, a luxury they had added during the last expansion. They prepared for bed quietly, moving around each other with the ease of long practice, and when they finally settled under the quilts, Nora curled into Isaac's side with a contented sigh. "I am so happy," she murmured, already half asleep. "So completely, perfectly happy." "So am I," Isaac whispered, pressing a kiss to her hair. "So am I, my love." He lay awake for a while after Nora's breathing had evened out into sleep, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling and the wind rustling through the trees outside. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, the pain and fear and eventual triumph. He thought about Nora's strength, the way she had refused to let her past destroy her future, the way she had learned to trust again despite every reason not to. Most of all, he thought about love, real and enduring love that did not fade when times got hard. The kind of love that showed up every day and made the choice to stay, to fight, to build something lasting. He had given Nora shelter from the storm, food when she was starving, warmth when she was frozen. But she had given him something far more valuable in return. She had given him purpose and joy, and a reason to believe in happy endings. The years continued to unfold with their share of challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters when the snow piled so high they were trapped for weeks, and dry summers when water ran scarce and they worried about the cattle. There were illnesses and injuries, the inevitable setbacks that came with ranch life and raising children. Daniel broke his arm falling from the hayloft when he was 13. The twins both came down with fever one terrifying week when they were 9, and Isaac and Nora took turns sitting up with them until the sickness passed. But there were far more good times than bad. First days of school and birthday celebrations and Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Daniel's first successful horse trade when he was 16. negotiating like a natural businessman and making Isaac proud. The twins learning to sew with their mother, creating increasingly elaborate dresses for their dolls and eventually for themselves. Nora thrived as a teacher, becoming beloved by generations of students who passed through her classroom. She had a gift for making learning exciting, for seeing potential in even the most difficult children, and drawing it out with patience and encouragement. The school board recognized her talent and offered her the position of head teacher when old Mr. Jenkins retired, a role she accepted with pride. Isaac's reputation as a horseman spread throughout Montana and beyond, and he began receiving letters from cavalry officers and wealthy ranchers asking to purchase his animals. He bred for intelligence and temperament as much as speed and strength, producing horses that were willing partners rather than just tools. His methods were considered progressive by some and old-fashioned by others, but nobody could argue with his results. When Daniel turned 18, he announced his intention to attend university in the East to study veterinary medicine. Isaac had mixed feelings about his son leaving Montana, but he recognized the same drive for knowledge and improvement that had always characterized Daniel. They threw a going-away party at the ranch, inviting neighbors from miles around, and Isaac gave his son a strong handshake and told him to make them proud. "I will come back," Daniel promised. "Montana is home. I just need to learn some things first, and then I will come back and help you run the ranch properly." "The ranch is already running properly," Isaac said with a smile, "but I will not turn down your help when you return. Lord knows I am not getting any younger." With Daniel gone, the house felt emptier, but the twins filled the space with their energy and constant activity. Sarah showed an interest in her mother's teaching, spending hours creating elaborate lesson plans for her dolls and later helping Nora with the younger students at school. Emma was more drawn to the ranch, following Isaac around and pestering him to teach her everything he knew about horses and cattle. "She has your gift," Nora told Isaac one evening after watching Emma gentle a skittish colt with nothing but soft words and patient hands. "She understands animals the way you do, sees them as individuals with their own personalities." "She has your determination," Isaac countered. That colt was considered unbreakable by 2 experienced handlers, but Emma would not give up on him. "Then she has the best of both of us," Nora said, smiling. "Just like all our children do." In the autumn of 1895, tragedy struck when Sheriff Tom Bennett, who had become a close friend over the years, died suddenly of a heart attack. Isaac and Nora attended the funeral in Deer Lodge, standing with the crowd of people whose lives the lawman had touched. Isaac thought about that day 17 years earlier when Bennett had arrested James Morrison, how the sheriff had believed Nora's story and protected her when others might not have bothered. "He was a good man," Nora said quietly as they drove home after the service. "I never properly thanked him for what he did for me, for believing me when I needed someone to believe." "He knew," Isaac assured her. "Every time he saw us together, saw our family and our happiness, he knew what his actions that day had made possible." The mention of Morrison brought up memories they rarely discussed anymore. The man was still serving his sentence at the territorial prison, though his release date was approaching. Isaac had made quiet inquiries to ensure they would be notified when Morrison was freed, unwilling to be caught off guard if the man decided to seek revenge. "You think he will come looking for us when he gets out?" Nora asked, voicing the worry that sometimes kept her awake at night. "I honestly do not know," Isaac said, "but if he does, he will find us prepared. And he will find that we are not the same people we were 17 years ago. We are stronger now, Nora, both of us." When Morrison was finally released in the spring of 1896, Isaac made sure everyone on the ranch knew to be watchful. He kept his rifle close and made certain Nora was never alone when traveling to and from town. But weeks passed without any sign of trouble, and gradually they began to relax. Then one afternoon, Isaac came back from checking the northern pasture to find a man standing in their yard, looking up at the house with an unreadable expression. He was older, grayer, worn down by hard years, but Isaac recognized James Morrison immediately. His hand went to his gun, but before he could draw, Morrison raised both hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not here to cause trouble," Morrison said, his voice rough. "I just wanted to see her one more time." "She does not want to see you," Isaac said flatly. "You need to leave." "I know I do not deserve forgiveness," Morrison continued as if Isaac had not spoken. "I know what I did was unforgivable. The truth is, prison gave me a lot of time to think about my life, about the man I was and the man I wanted to be. I am not that angry, violent person anymore, Rawlins. The years broke me down and built me back up different. That does not change what you did to Nora. It does not erase the pain you caused. I know. I am not asking for absolution. I just wanted her to know that I am sorry, truly sorry for everything. And I wanted to tell her that I am leaving Montana, going to California to start over somewhere nobody knows my name or my history. She will never have to worry about me again." The front door opened, and Nora stepped out, and Isaac saw her stiffen when she recognized her former husband. Morrison's eyes widened, taking in the changes 17 years had brought. Nora was 43 now, her dark blonde hair streaked with silver, and her face lined with the experience of a full life. But she carried herself with confidence and grace, nothing like the terrified, broken woman Morrison had abandoned in the snow. "Hello, James," she said calmly. "I hear you want to apologize." "I do. For what little it is worth, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I did to you, Nora. There is no excuse for my actions, no justification that makes them acceptable. I was a monster and you deserved so much better." Nora studied him for a long moment, and Isaac could see the complex emotions playing across her face. Finally, she spoke. "I forgive you, James. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I refuse to carry hatred in my heart anymore. I spent too many years being afraid of you, letting the memory of what you did control my life. But I am free of that now. I am happy, truly happy, and no amount of anger toward you is worth risking that happiness." Morrison's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded jerkily. "Thank you. That is more than I dared hope for. I can see that you have built a good life here. I am glad. You deserve every bit of happiness you have found." He turned to leave, but Nora called out to him, "James, I hope you find peace in California. I hope you become the man you were meant to be before anger and alcohol twisted you into something else." "I am trying," Morrison said simply. "Every day, I am trying." They watched him ride away, and Isaac put his arm around Nora's shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I am," Nora said, leaning into him. "I feel lighter, actually. Like I just set down a burden I had been carrying for so long I forgot it was there. He cannot hurt me anymore, Isaac. Not physically, not emotionally, not in any way. That part of my life is finally, completely over." Isaac kissed the top of her head, relief flooding through him. "Good. Then we can move forward without looking back." The twins graduated from school that spring, both 18 and ready to begin their adult lives. Sarah accepted a teaching position at a school in Billings, following in her mother's footsteps with pride and enthusiasm. Emma announced her intention to stay on the ranch and work with Isaac, learning the business from the inside out so she could eventually take over when he was ready to retire. "You sure about this?" Isaac asked her. "Ranch life is hard work, Emma." Long hours, difficult conditions, no guarantees of success. "I know, Papa," Emma said, using the childhood name she had never quite outgrown. "But this land is in my blood. I cannot imagine doing anything else, being anywhere else. Besides, someone needs to keep the Rawlins legacy going, and Daniel is still off playing doctor to rich people's horses in Philadelphia." Isaac laughed, proud of his daughter's determination and independence. She was so much like Nora, with that same core of steel beneath her gentle exterior, and he knew she would be an excellent rancher. Daniel did eventually return to Montana, bringing with him a degree in veterinary medicine and a wife named Margaret who had grown up on a farm in Pennsylvania. They settled in Deer Lodge, where Daniel opened a practice, and the young couple quickly became fixtures in the community. Margaret gave birth to Isaac and Nora's first grandchild in 1898, a boy they named Thomas after the late sheriff. And Isaac discovered that being a grandfather was even better than being a father. The new century arrived with celebrations across Montana, people gathering to mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. Isaac and Nora hosted a party at the ranch, their home filled with children and grandchildren, neighbors and friends, all toasting to the future while honoring the past. Isaac looked around at the faces he loved, at the life he and Nora had built from nothing, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Nora found him later that evening on the porch, escaping the noise and heat inside for a few minutes of peace. She sat beside him, taking his hand in hers, and they looked out at the land they had worked for over 2 decades. 22 years, Nora said softly. 22 years since you found me dying in the snow. Sometimes it still feels like a dream, like I am going to wake up and find myself back in that nightmare with James. This is real, Isaac said, bringing her hand to his lips. This is our life, Nora. We earned it, every bit of happiness we have. We did, she agreed. Together. Always together, Isaac confirmed, from that day to this one and for all the days still to come. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of their separate pasts. Inside the house, their family laughed and celebrated, marking time's passage with joy rather than sadness. The Wild West that had shaped their early lives was fading now, giving way to modernity and progress, but some things remained constant. Love, loyalty, family, home. The things that truly mattered. As 1900 turned to 1901 and beyond, Isaac and Nora continued their work with the ranch and the school, though at a slightly slower pace as age began to catch up with them. Isaac was in his 50s now, his hair gone completely gray and his joints aching on cold mornings. Nora taught only part-time, leaving the full-time work to younger teachers while she focused on developing curriculum and mentoring new educators. Emma proved herself a capable ranch manager, implementing new breeding techniques and business practices that increased profitability while maintaining the high standards Isaac had established. She married a neighboring rancher's son in 1903, a quiet, hard-working man named Robert Turner who fit seamlessly into the Rawlins family. Their wedding was the social event of the season, with guests traveling from across the territory to celebrate. Sarah flourished in Billings, becoming principal of her school by age 30 and marrying one of her fellow teachers. Daniel's veterinary practice grew until he needed to hire an assistant, and his family expanded to include 3 children who visited their grandparents regularly. Isaac and Nora's home was never quiet for long, always filled with grandchildren running through the rooms and asking endless questions. In the spring of 1908, Montana achieved statehood, officially joining the Union after years as a territory. Isaac and Nora attended the celebration in Helena, watching the new state flag being raised with tears in their eyes. This land had given them everything, had been the setting for their greatest struggles and their greatest triumphs, and seeing it recognized as equal to the older states felt significant somehow. "We helped build this," Nora said as they stood in the crowd. "Not just Montana, but the whole West. Every person who came here looking for a new start, who worked the land and raised families and built communities. We were part of something bigger than ourselves." "We were," Isaac agreed. "And we did it right, with honor and integrity. That matters." As Isaac entered his 60s, he began experiencing problems with his heart, occasional pains that the doctor assured him were nothing serious, but advised him to take it easy. He grudgingly cut back on his physical work, leaving more of the ranch operations to Emma and Robert, while he focused on training horses and advising rather than doing the heavy labor himself. Nora retired from teaching in 1912 at age 60, ready to spend more time with her grandchildren and work on the book she had always wanted to write. She penned her memoirs over the course of 2 years, documenting her journey from Philadelphia to Montana, her marriage to James Morrison, the terrible night he left her to die, and her rescue and recovery with Isaac. She wrote honestly about abuse and trauma, about healing and love, about finding strength in the darkest moments. When the book was published in 1914, it caused quite a stir, praised by critics for its unflinching honesty and emotional depth. Women wrote to Nora from across the country, sharing their own stories of abuse and thanking her for giving voice to experiences that were too often hidden and ignored. Nora donated half the royalties to organizations that helped women escape violent marriages, determined to use her platform to create real change. Isaac was immensely proud of his wife, though he worried that reliving those painful memories might be difficult for her. But Nora assured him that writing the book had been cathartic, a way of fully processing and releasing the last remnants of trauma that had lingered for so many years. "Besides," she told him with a smile, "the best parts were writing about you, about how you saved me in every way a person can be saved. The world needs to hear that story, needs to know that good men exist, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1915 with a huge party at the ranch, attended by what seemed like half of Montana. Their children gave speeches praising their parents' love and commitment. Their grandchildren performed a play they had written about how Isaac and Nora met, complete with costumes and props. Friends and neighbors shared stories about the couple's generosity and kindness over the years, the countless ways they had touched lives and made their community better. Isaac stood to give a toast, raising his glass while emotion threatened to overwhelm him. 30 years ago, I married the love of my life in a simple ceremony with just a few witnesses. I promised to honor and cherish her for as long as I lived, and I have kept that promise every single day since. Nora, you have been my partner, my best friend, my reason for everything good in my life. You brought light into darkness, warmth into cold, love into loneliness. I thank God every day that my horse stopped that morning, that I found you when I did, that I was given the privilege of being your husband. Here is to 30 years, my love, and to however many more we are granted." Nora stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him in front of everyone while their guests cheered and applauded. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration not just of their marriage but of their entire shared life, everything they had overcome and achieved together. The world beyond Montana was changing rapidly, with the Great War raging in Europe and affecting even remote corners of America. Daniel enlisted as a military veterinarian in 1917, serving overseas and leaving Margaret to manage his practice with help from his assistant. It was a frightening time, waiting for letters and praying for his safe return. But Daniel survived the war and came home in 1919 with medals and stories he would only share years later. Isaac and Nora were in their 70s by then, both slowing down but still sharp mentally and deeply engaged with their family and community. They spent their days on the porch, watching the ranch operations from a distance and offering advice when asked. Grandchildren came to visit and hear stories about the old days, about what Montana had been like when it was still truly wild. "Tell us about the blizzard, Grandma," they would beg, and Nora would recount the story of that terrible night, softening some details for younger ears but never hiding the truth of what had happened. "And then your grandfather found me, and he saved my life. He gave me food when I was starving, warmth when I was freezing, and hope when I thought there was nothing left to hope for. He fed my body and my broken spirit, and he has continued feeding them with love every day since." In the winter of 1923, Isaac suffered a serious heart attack that left him bedridden for weeks. The doctor was frank that there might not be many more years, that his heart had been severely damaged and another attack could come at any time. Isaac took the news calmly, saying he had been blessed with far more years than he ever expected, and if his time was coming, he was ready. But Nora was not ready. She stayed by his bedside constantly during his recovery, reading to him and holding his hand and refusing to consider a future without him. Isaac rallied slowly, regaining enough strength to move around the house, though his days of working the ranch were clearly over. He accepted his limitations with grace, content to sit with Nora and watch their grandchildren play, to feel the sun on his face, and know he was surrounded by love. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary quietly in 1925. Just family gathered around the table for a simple dinner. Isaac was 73 now, his body failing even as his mind remained sharp. Nora was 72, her hair completely white but her eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. They held hands throughout the meal, fingers intertwined in a gesture so automatic neither of them probably realized they were doing it. After dinner, Isaac asked to speak privately with each of their children. He told them how proud he was of what they had accomplished, how grateful he was for the joy they had brought him. He shared advice and memories, blessing each of them in turn. When Emma broke down crying, Isaac pulled her close and assured her that death was not something to fear, that he had lived a full and happy life beyond anything he could have imagined. That night, lying in bed with Nora curled against his side the way she had for 40 years, Isaac spoke softly into the darkness. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to trust any man. Thank you for building this life with me, for giving me children and grandchildren and more happiness than I ever deserved. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Nora. The absolute best." "You saved me," Nora whispered, her tears soaking into his nightshirt. "You saved me when I was lost, and you loved me when I did not know how to love myself. Everything good in my life started with you, Isaac. Every bit of joy, every moment of peace, every dream that came true. I love you so much it hurts sometimes, like my heart cannot quite contain it all." "I love you too," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. "I will always love you in this life and whatever comes after." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and in the morning, Nora woke to find that Isaac had passed peacefully during the night, his face relaxed and content, his hand still holding hers. The grief was crushing, a weight that threatened to drag Nora under. For 47 years, Isaac had been her anchor, her safe harbor, the person she turned to for everything. The house felt empty without his presence, the ranch too quiet without his voice. She moved through the days in a fog, accepting condolences and making arrangements while feeling like part of her soul had been ripped away. The funeral drew hundreds of people, testament to the life Isaac had lived and the respect he had earned. Cowboys and businessmen, teachers and ranchers, Native Americans from nearby reservations who remembered Isaac's fair dealing. They all came to pay their respects, to share stories of Isaac's kindness and integrity, to support the family he left behind. Nora stood at the graveside with her children surrounding her, watching as Isaac's casket was lowered into the ground. She thought about that January morning 47 years ago when he had found her dying in the snow, when his simple act of compassion had changed both their lives forever. He had been her rescuer, her protector, her partner, her love. And now he was gone, and she would have to figure out how to live without him. But as she looked at her children and grandchildren, at the legacy of love they had created together, Nora realized that Isaac was not truly gone. He lived on in Daniel's dedication to healing, in Emma's connection to the land, in Sarah's commitment to education. He lived on in grandchildren who carried his name and his values, who had learned from his example what it meant to live with honor and compassion. Most of all, he lived on in Nora's heart, in 47 years of memories that would sustain her through however many days she had left. The blizzard had tried to kill her once, had stripped away everything except her will to survive. Isaac had given that will purpose, had fed her starving body and her broken spirit until she was strong enough to thrive. And the love they had built together, the family they had raised, the life they had shared, that was immortal in a way death could never touch. Nora lived another 8 years after Isaac's passing, staying active and engaged with her family and community. She finally moved into town at age 75, leaving the ranch in Emma and Robert's capable hands, while she settled into a small house near the school where she had taught for so many years. Her grandchildren visited constantly, and great-grandchildren began arriving, tiny miracles that delighted her. She spent her time writing letters, volunteering at the library, attending church every Sunday, and working on a second book about frontier education. She spoke at women's clubs and schools about abuse and survival, continuing the advocacy work she had started with her memoirs. And every evening, she sat on her porch and looked west toward the mountains, toward the ranch where she had found happiness, and talked to Isaac as if he were sitting beside her. "Had another great-grandchild today," she would say. "Daniel's oldest daughter had a little boy. They named him Isaac after you. He has your eyes, I think. I wish you could see him." She told him about Emma's success expanding the horse breeding program, about Sarah's retirement and her plans to travel, about all the small daily details that made up a life. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Nora could swear she heard Isaac's voice answering her, assuring her that he was still watching over their family, still proud of everything they had built. Nora passed away in her sleep in April of 1933, just a month shy of her 81st birthday. She was found in her bed with a peaceful expression on her face, a letter to Isaac lying finished on her nightstand. Her children read the letter at her funeral, sharing their mother's final words with everyone gathered to say goodbye. "My dearest Isaac," the letter began. "By the time anyone reads this, I will be with you again, and we can begin the next chapter of our journey together. I have missed you every single day since you left, but I stayed because our family needed me, because there was still work to be done, because I wanted to see our legacy continue to grow and flourish. I am so proud of what we created together, of the lives we touched and the love we shared." You found me in the snow, broken and dying, and you brought me back to life. You fed my body when I was starving, and you fed my spirit with kindness and patience and eventually love. You gave me everything a person could want: purpose, family, happiness, home. You gave me myself back when I thought I had lost her forever. Now I am ready to come home to you, to wherever you are waiting. I am ready to rest in your arms again, to hear your voice, to feel the warmth of your love surrounding me. Wait for me, my darling. I will be with you soon. Forever yours, Nora. They buried her next to Isaac in the cemetery outside Deer Lodge, beneath a headstone that bore both their names and a simple inscription. Together they found love in the wilderness and built a legacy that will endure forever. The ranch stayed in the Rawlins family for generations, passed down from Emma to her children and their children in turn. The horses bred there continue to be sought after across the West, known for their intelligence and temperament as much as their physical abilities. The family maintained Isaac's commitment to ethical treatment of animals and fair dealings with people, values that became synonymous with the Rawlins name. Nora's books remained in print, continuing to inspire women facing their own struggles with abuse and survival. Schools across Montana used her story to teach about resilience and the importance of helping those in need. The love story of Isaac and Nora became local legend, the tale of how a cowboy found a woman dying in a blizzard and saved not just her life but her soul. And on quiet winter nights when snow fell thick across Montana, when the wind howled and the cold bit deep, people would remember that long-ago storm and the miracle it had produced. They would remember that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, that love can bloom even in the harshest conditions, that kindness and compassion can transform lives in ways nothing else can. Isaac had found Nora when she had nothing left, when she had been abandoned to starve and freeze in the snow. He had fed her body with food and warmth, and he had fed her broken spirit with patience and respect, and eventually deep, abiding love. Together they had built something beautiful from tragedy, had created a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was a story worth remembering, worth sharing, worth celebrating. Because in the end, it was not just their story. It was the story of every person who had ever been lost and then found, broken and then healed, abandoned and then loved. It was the story of survival and resilience, of second chances and new beginnings. It was the story of two souls who found each other in the wilderness and decided to build paradise together, one day at a time, for the rest of their lives. And that was the greatest legacy of all.